Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're exploring a high-stakes human endeavor that is honestly absolutely fascinating. Imagine trying to preserve the origins of an entire civilization and faith. And we're not talking about using printing presses or digital servers here. We're talking about scattered animal bones, palm leaves, and human memory. I mean, how do you take a message born in the rugged, sun-drenched mountains of 7th century Arabia and literally forge it into an unbreakable chain of trust that survives for millennia? Well, let's dive right in and uncover the incredible forensic methodology and unwavering dedication that actually preserved early Islamic history.
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to look at 1. The companions, 2. Compiling the Quran, 3. Preserving the Sunnah, 4. The science of men, and finally, 5. Documenting Islamic history.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the companions, the human instruments of preservation.
You literally can't understand the preservation of Islamic history without first understanding the human instruments who actually carried it, right? And those are the Sahaba. As you can see defined here, the companions encompassed everyone from the scribes and disciples to the family of the Prophet Muhammad. Their first-hand experiences, their immense sacrifices, and their living memories were absolutely crucial to passing down the religion. In fact, the Quran itself actually divides them by these sacrifices, ranking them by their deeds, which really created a living, breathing foundation for the early Ummah.
Now, as Islamic history developed, so did the theological lenses through which this foundational generation was viewed. Looking at the Sunni perspective on the left, there's a heavy emphasis on the collective righteousness, or adala, of the Sahaba. Trusting the companions as a whole is viewed as a core tenet for upholding the vast corpus of transmitted sayings. But conversely, the Shia perspective over on the right places paramount emphasis on loyalty to the Prophet's family, the Al-Bayt. This view looks really closely at specific historical occurrences. For instance, the event of Thursday, which was when prominent companions refused an order to join a military battalion shortly before the Prophet's passing, and it really emphasizes the preemptive imamat of Ali. It is super vital for us to understand these differing perspectives, because they deeply shaped how early history was ultimately recorded, interpreted, and passed down to us.
Moving right along to Section 2, compiling the Quran, from fragments to the first Mushaf.
So picture this. The early community is facing a dramatically urgent problem. The Prophet had passed away, and the primary human vessels carrying the divine revelation, the memorizers, were actively dying in battle. If you look at this timeline, in 632 CE, during the Battle of Yamama, a dangerously high number of the Qurra, the people who knew the entire Quran by heart, were killed. Omar ibn al-Khattab saw this and realized, hey, if this keeps happening, the text itself might actually be lost forever. So he urgently pleaded with Caliph Abu Bakr to collect all the scattered writings. And fast forward a bit, by the time we reach Caliph Othman between 644 and 656 CE, Islam had expanded so vastly that differing regional dialects were causing disputes in recitation. Uthman stepped in to standardize the text to unite the Ummah, sending official copies to major cities and ordering any variant fragments to be destroyed.
To really truly grasp the sheer weight of this task, just read this quote from Zayd ibn Thabit. He was the brilliant young scribe tasked by Abu Bakr to lead this whole compilation effort. He said, "I swear to God that had they asked me to move a mountain, it would have been easier than that task assigned to me." Wow, I mean, this wasn't just some standard clerical work. This was an immense, emotional, spiritual, and historical burden. He was literally holding the spiritual destiny of millions of people right in his hands.
Okay, so how on earth did Zayd accomplish this seemingly impossible task? Well, his approach brilliantly illustrates the strict forensic-level methodology of the early Muslims. First, he went out and collected every single written fragment he could find. We're talking pieces of leather, animal bones, palm leaves. Second, he meticulously verified these physical fragments against the living memories of the Hafazah, the memorizers. And third, and honestly this is the most critical part, he required 2 completely reliable witnesses who'd heard that specific verse directly from the Prophet Muhammad. Only then, after passing all those checks, was a verse accepted into the first unified manuscript, or Mushaf, which was then kept by Abu Bakr.
That brings us to Section 3, preserving the Sunnah, memory and early manuscripts.
There's actually a pretty common misconception out there that early Islam relied exclusively on oral transmission for the first century. But the reality? It's twofold. On one hand, yes, absolutely we have hifz. That's the oral tradition taking full advantage of the highly developed memory skills of early Arabs to create this living, breathing chain of transmission that crossed borders and kept regional drifts in check. But right alongside that, we also have the Sahifa, the written tradition. We have early physical records like Al-Sahifa al-Sadaqa, compiled by Abdullah ibn Amr, and get this, the dictations that Ali ibn Abi Talib actually kept rolled up tucked inside the sheath of his sword. It's like something out of a movie, right? Writing and memorization were absolutely working hand in hand.
So you might be wondering, if they were writing things down, why wasn't there a massive state-sponsored compilation of hadith right out of the gate, just like there was for the Quran? Well, there were some deeply practical reasons for that. First off, they were prioritizing the Quran. That absolutely had to be standardized first. Second, there was a very genuine fear among the companions of accidentally mixing up the Prophet's words with the divine revelation of the Quran itself. Third, they could heavily rely on their incredible, almost superhuman cultural capacity for oral memory. And finally, widespread writing proficiency was still pretty limited among the general public back then. It just wasn't practical yet.
All right, Section 4, The Science of Men, Ilm al-Rijal and the Quest for Truth.
Now, as the generations expanded and time went on, just relying on oral memory wasn't going to cut it. They needed a foolproof system to weed out mistakes, forgetfulness, or, outright lies. And that brings us to the concept of adalah. Think of this as an ancient, hyper-rigorous forensic background check. For any historical report to be accepted, the person transmitting it had to possess adalah, meaning absolute trustworthiness, piety, and unwavering integrity. Scholars would literally scrutinize a transmitter's entire character, their memory, exactly who they met and when, and even mundane things like if they had a habit of lying in their everyday business trades. If their character had even a single flaw, nope, their historical report was entirely rejected.
Okay, I really want you to take a second and truly absorb the number you're seeing right now. 500,000. Early Islamic scholars investigated, scrutinized, and created 500,000 handwritten biographical records. I mean, just let that sink in. Long before computers or digital databases or even the printing press, they built this massive manual network of data to cross-check sources and authenticate information. It is just a staggering, almost unbelievable level of academic dedication to the truth.
And that leads us nicely to our final part, Section 5, Documenting Islamic History and the Legacy of Al-Tabari.
So all of this preserved text, this incredibly vetted transmission, and those 500,000 biographies we just talked about, they ultimately culminated in some truly monumental historiography. Let's look at the 10th century legacy of Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari. He wrote a massive 40-volume history of the entire world, going all the way from creation right down to the Abbasid era. Now, when writing this, he had a choice in his format. He could write biographically, going person by person, or analytically, going year by year. As you can see, al-Tabari chose the analytic format. By arranging everything chronologically on a master timeline, he made it possible for future generations to understand the really broad historical themes and see exactly how events unfolded in proper sequence.
But here's the thing, al-Tabari did something absolutely revolutionary for history writing. He introduced the isnad, the chains of transmission. He didn't just casually write down what happened, he wrote down exactly how he knew it, listing out the specific chain of narrators for his reports. By doing this, he successfully merged normal historical narrative with the incredibly strict academic rigor of the hadith sciences we talked about earlier. It effectively permanently locked history into a verifiable timeline. A real game changer.
Which brings us to a final thought to wrap up this explainer. Today, we build these complex digital blockchains and decentralized servers to protect our data and verify the truth, right? But when we look back at the origins of Islamic historiography, at Zod saying he'd rather move mountains, at 500,000 handwritten biographies, at Tabari's unbroken chains of transmission, we really have to ask ourselves, could any modern technology truly rival the unyielding human dedication of the early scholars' chain of trust? It's just a remarkable testament to the power of human conviction. Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.